Good morning, everyone. My name is Cody Dunton. I am the president of the student BMES chapter at Clemson University, and this is Sarah Helms, who will be presenting with me. She is the vice president and mentorship chair. And just a quick shout out to Sarah. She took this program from its implementation to where we are today in a year. So without her, we would not be here, and she did a ton of work to make this happen. So just a quick overview. We're going to talk about the implementation of our program last year, and then we're going to end talking about the best practices for other universities to implement mentorship programs at their universities. So we're basically going to start with the overall goals. The first goal was to involve as many students as possible, because without students being involved, there is no mentorship, right? So we wanted to encourage participation from both graduate, undergraduate students, as well as anyone else that would want to be involved. And the main thing that we want to talk about today, and you'll hear us talk about this over and over again, is that we wanted to facilitate informal interactions for our mentorship program. So especially between our mentors and mentees. And we hope that by promoting these informal interactions, that it would lead to conversations and friendships to develop, and that would organically morph into these mentorship conversations. We also wanted to bridge the gap between undergraduate and graduate students. So I know if anyone's grad program is like our grad program, you interact with undergrads as TAs, so in a classroom setting or in the research lab. So we wanted to break that mold. We wanted to get outside of the lab and the classroom, and we wanted to interact informal events and kind of bridge the gap between graduate students and undergrads. We also wanted to provide mentoring opportunities in academia as well as industry, as well as for undergraduate students that are looking to go into graduate school. And lastly, we wanted to promote Clemson's bioengineering department to the general engineering undergraduate students, which we'll talk a little bit more about this later. So just a brief description of our program. So our theme was Legends of the Hidden Temple. So I can tell by some of your faces, if you were born in the early 90s, you know what this is. So like us, because we've been here a while. But if not, we'll talk a little bit about what Legends of the Hidden Temple is. Just so everyone knows, it was a Nickelodeon show in the early 90s. It was a game show.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the teams were divided, or the participants were divided into teams based on their interest in various bioengineering aspects of the bioengineering field. And we'll talk a little bit more about those subdivisions. We tried to have one large event each month, and that large event was a little bit more structured. But we also promoted informal events to occur throughout the semester. So we didn't want that. We wanted informal events to always happen. And that could be to meet up with your group for coffee or lunch, just so that we, again, could promote these informal interactions. And lastly, we had a final event where teams competed against each other in events similar to the Legends of the Hidden Temple show. And again, we'll talk about these in a little bit. So we were very happy with the participation numbers from our first year. So we had 26 graduate students that participated, 28 undergrads, and then we had 3 permanent mentors that were not on a team, but they mentored the students. So that was comprised of a senior undergrad, a third-year PhD at the time, now she's a fourth-year PhD student, and a postdoc. And so we divided the teams based on, so Clemson's bioengineering program has 4 tracks. It's biomaterials, regenerative medicine, bioelectrical, and biomechanics. So we asked when everyone signed up to specify what track they were interested in, and so we divided the teams based on their interest in bioengineering.
All right, so I wanted to go over the events that we did. We had an introduction night where we got people to come just hear us out about what the program was, see if they wanted to actually continue throughout the semester. Then we had the structured monthly events that he was talking about, and then we had the final event, and then small kind of impromptu events throughout the semester. So for the introduction night, we introduced the theme, and since quite a few undergrads had not heard of it, we watched an episode of it. So we got people pretty hype about it. There were, quality 90s style commercials and prizes like Walkmans and Skechers. So everyone got kind of excited about, which was the whole point. We had pizza. We divided the teams. So like you said, we asked people to sign up ahead of time with what their research interests were, and I had divided them accordingly to make them most evenly split, and still make sure that undergrads had grad students that were interested in the same type of research in their group with them so they could talk to them about things. The teammates got to know each other, and they picked colors, names, and logos. So if you guys know the teams in the show, they're these colors. It's things like purple parrots, green monkeys, orange iguanas. We had the biomaterials group. They were the blue brains. Green growth factors, purple pipettes, and silver stunts were all the regen med-based groups. And orange orthopedics were the biomechanics. And they drew out their logos on, I mean, like, this doesn't have to be expensive. We just took the pizza box tops and we had them draw them out. And it got everyone talking and doing stuff. We introduced the point system. So this is how we kind of kept track of participation throughout the semester. So this is a example of the output spreadsheet that Anna Lou, who's in the audience, helped me make. Basically, we had people sign up for events throughout the semester. Like when they came, they signed in, it output how many people from each team came, and then in the purple columns, those were the monthly events, so they got more points. It was like a higher multiplier for the more structured things, so we got people coming to the things that we were purposefully including, like real mentors and stuff too. And then the Facebook events, which I'll go into, were the more informal ones. And at the end, the points totaled, and we broke them down into pendants, because in the show, there are pendants that ward off the temple guards. Talk about it later. So then we had everyone join a Facebook group. This is something that if you guys were at the mentorship award talk last year, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign did this, basically this setup, and we thought it sounded like it worked pretty well. So we went for it too, and I'd say it worked for us. So I know not everyone has a Facebook, but still the majority of people do. And this was a way that we could literally say at any time, it was like first group to go get ice cream together, take a picture, and post it on the Facebook page, got a point. And it would turn out things like this. Our only rule was that there had to be at least 3 people from the group present, and there had to be at least 1 undergrad and 1 grad student present, because the grad students often get lunch together, and that no one's mentoring anyone during that. So we wanted to get some mix of people, and it just kind of, again, facilitated those informal interactions. We wanted people to not be worried about meeting up with people informally just to talk about stuff. So I wanted to go through some of the events that we did, highlight the ones that we thought were particularly useful. We had a newlyweds night, and we took those pizza boxes and they made logos and they painted them on team t-shirts. And during this whole time, we asked them to talk to each other, get to know each other, and we had them compete in a newlyweds game. So one person from each group would come up, I would ask a question. It would be something like, where'd they go to undergrad if they're all grad students, or like, how many pets do they have? It was weird stuff, and it was just like to try to get them to break the ice, and if they matched, if what the person at the front matched what the team wrote, they got a point. Then we did a freshman expo slash lab demos. So I don't know how everyone else's universities are, but at Clemson, we have all freshmen that come into engineering, even if they know they want to do bioengineering, they have to be declared as general engineering, and then they later declare into a specific engineering major. And Clemson used to require those students in their gen engineering classes to go on like mini tours to the departments to learn about them, but they got rid of it. And we kind of wanted to bring it back, so we had 10 different labs represented. It goes from, you can see even in the pictures, it's prosthetics and football helmets to magnetic nanoparticles to bionic arms. We just wanted to show any freshman coming in that, like, even if you thought that bioengineering was only one thing, there's actually quite a few things that we do. And we invited not just these general engineering students, but if you were an undergrad that you hadn't picked a lab to do research in, this was a good way to find out what labs there were and what they did in them. And then we had a sign-up sheet where I blasted them with information about bioengineering or how to get in contact with the advisor that runs the lab that they were interested in. And then the mentorship, our student chapter at BMES is actually split. We have a grad half and an undergrad half. So the mentoring chair from the undergrad half led tours, and she kind of showed them the undergrad lab spaces. She kind of went through a little PowerPoint of what the curriculum's like, what life is like as an undergrad in BioE, and co-op internship opportunities, stuff like that.
Right, so we also had a career track night. So this was a little more formal event because we brought in alumni from our program. that were currently working in industry, or we brought in professors that are in the tenure track program at Clemson. We brought them in. So this was a little more formal event, a little more structured, but this was also one of the few events that we put on where graduate students were also being mentored, because we had, you know, alumni from our program and things like that that would come back and talk to those grad students. So we partnered with our student chapter's professional development committee to bring in these representatives from these various companies and industry. So, I mean, we brought in people from, you know, well-established companies like Stryker, as well as a little bit smaller startup companies in the Greenville area, kind of near Clemson. So, you know, graduate students and undergrads could talk to them about what the environment's like at a startup versus at a more established company, you know, how to apply to those various positions, how to interview, things like that. We also had students that had previously done co-ops and internships at places like Gore and Johnson & Johnson. And a lot of our freshmen, or even younger undergrads, wanted to do co-ops and internships, but they weren't sure how. So by talking to people that they had interacted with informally throughout the semester, they were able to easily ask them, you know, where do you go sign up to do co-ops and internships? Who do you contact? Do you know someone at, you know, Gore that I can get in touch with, and try and get these co-ops and internships started? We also had like I said, two of our faculty, tenure track faculty that were there, and they had actually, it was cool because they had spent their first years in industry, and then they came back and started teaching. So they could actually talk to what it's like to be in industry versus academia for people like me who have no idea what you want to do after you graduate. So I got to talk to them about, you know, do I want to go in academia track, and what does that entail? Do I want to do industry? What does that entail? And it was a small, like, one-on-one, one-on-two type of interaction, as opposed to like taking a class with them and going up and asking them after class, or bumping into them in the hallway and asking, you know, how did you get into academia? It's not really a conversation you can have at that, but for the career track night, we structured it in a way to facilitate those conversations. And we also had Miss Maria Torres, who is amazing. She is our graduate student service coordinator at Clemson. So she was also there, and she could talk to the undergrads about how to apply for admission into the graduate program at Clemson or the satellite campuses, or just graduate school in general, and answer a lot of the questions that students had that wanted to go into graduate school.
So I thought I would highlight the final event, because I think anyone that participated in the programs would say this was the most fun that we had. So to go over what an episode of the Legends of the Hidden Temple is like, there's a moat, and it's basically the teams have to get across a body of water. Then there's the steps of knowledge, where they hear a brief story, usually slightly ridiculous and maybe fictional, from Olmec, who then questions them on things, and if they get them correct, they move down, and the two teams that make it to that bottom step get to move on.
So Olmec is a talking rock.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I did not dress up as it, but they asked. I couldn't make it. Then we had temple games, which are 3-minute long fun games, and then the team that won that got to go to the temple run, which I know is hard to see, but it's basically a massive maze where you try to get to the shrine of the silver monkey, and you run into temple guards. You ward them off with your pendant that you got throughout the time. So that's what we were basing it off of. So for the moat, we had all the team members line up back to back, and they poured water over their head, and they caught it in the next cup, and then they kept going, and they all got back in line. And the first team to cross the finish line got a point, and the team with the most water at the end got a point. We then did the steps of knowledge, which I did a little spiel about the legend of the Clemson hip, which is a coating on a hip prosthesis that Clemson is known for. And then I questioned them on things, and like in the show, we had the first two teams that make it to the bottom get a point, except for we didn't want to eliminate teams because we wanted everyone to do it all, so no one got eliminated, you just got points for stuff. We then did the temple games, which were basically minute-to-win-it games. They were 60-second games. The first one was M&M pickup, where you had to move with a straw M&Ms from one plate to another. Then a mini marshmallow toss, and I just want to point out the quality of Dragon Ball Z outfit and cut-off jorts. We went hard with the 90s theme, which I think is, again, the theme is important.
Listen, we don't always dress like Clemson, just so everyone knows.
And then we did the cookie face challenge, which we took lots of pictures of because there are good faces made, where you have to take, you put a cookie on your forehead and you have to get it to your mouth without touching it with your hands. So we looked ridiculous. We're in the middle of campus doing this. And the winning team of each of those challenges got a point. And then the final thing was the temple run. We basically sent everyone on a huge scavenger hunt. And this one was actually pretty cool because this was something where the undergrads actually mentored our graduate students. So the undergrads are more familiar with all of campus. They're familiar with the history of the campus, whereas the grad students are pretty stuck in one building. For the most part, they don't venture out. They don't know much about stuff. So I think this was cool that the undergrads got to do some teaching. I think the grad students enjoyed it. And then they could call me with requesting a hint, and they used one of their pendants. So that was how we incorporated the pendants. So if you participated more throughout the semester, you had a better chance of winning the final event, was the idea. So at the end of all of this, we kind of wanted to see, it was our first year doing it, how well did we do? We sent out a survey to the participants, and we wanted to know what they liked about the program, what they didn't, what they thought we could improve on. The other thing that we were interested in was just attendance. We wanted to know how many people stayed throughout the program, which events had higher attendance rates, and maybe why. And we wanted to also have those numbers to compare to this year to see how well the retention rate was. And the recommendations we got from the survey were to increase awareness of the program to the undergraduates. So in our department, the percentage of graduate students that are involved in our BMES student chapter is pretty high, but the percentage of undergraduates involved is not as high. And there's a lot more undergraduates, but what we found was that undergraduates that were in the department heard about the program and wanted to be involved, but not necessarily involved in the whole BMES student chapter. So we've decided, instead of focusing just on making announcements to the student chapter at the meetings that we hold, we're actually just going to send blasts out to the whole department, try to get as many people involved as possible. There was a request to vary the event days, and I'll go into in a second why we put them all in one day. And then a lot of people asked for more large-scale informal events like that Newlyweds Night. I think it helped, especially at the beginning, really facilitate those informal interactions, but they were almost like forced to be informal, which I think did help. And I think people enjoyed getting to know people better in a fun environment.
Right, so we had a lot of momentum from our first semester of implementing this program, so we wanted to keep it going. So we wanted to announce the next theme at the final event from the Legends of the Hidden Bioengineering Temple event. So basically, if you can't tell, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Bioengineering Edition is our next theme for our mentorship program. So basically, the winner of the games their prize was a Power Rangers piñata. So that's how we broke the news to everyone what the next theme was going to be. And having, we wanted to keep changing the theme from semester to semester, as well as changing the teams, just to maintain the excitement and the interest level, so that things are always changing. No one gets kind of stuck in this rut. So that's why we are going to continue to change the theme, as well as mix the teams up.
Yeah. So this is probably the most important slide if you only want to pay attention to one. We just wanted to go over what we would recommend to any other group. It was things that we learned from UIUC, and they worked out well for us, so we think that it's possible that it will work well for other people. One huge question that I think happens at every single one of these mentoring talks is, how do you get a time for grad students and undergrads to meet at the same time, because they don't have the same schedules. Grad students work all day, they don't want to stay later. Undergrads have classes and would prefer to have group meetings at night, and it's just opposite. We in our department have a mandatory seminar for graduate students. It's like once every 3 weeks or so, so it was about once a month, and we use that as the night of our monthly event. So we had a group of graduate students all in one room, and we told them, if you don't leave, we'll give you food. And the undergrads show up, and it ended up working out pretty well, which is my second bullet point of have food. It really does pull people in. I know if you don't have the money, it's not a great option, but we were lucky to have the undergraduate half of our student chapter offer up pizza at every event, every major event at least. And so it was a good way to convince people, at least convince the grad students that they could stay later, and I think they had fun while they were there. The other thing was to keep the theme fresh and fun. I think a big thing was that we were really excited about this theme. We dressed up. The final event, there aren't any pictures, but I dressed up as Kirk Fogg. We had people dressed up in a lot of cargo shorts involved, a lot of 90s theme.
A lot of jean print.
Yeah, denim was heavy. And people were really excited about it. And I think if you get people excited about coming to these events, then all of the other stuff follows. We would recommend that whatever theme you pick, you can divide the teams up easily. We prefer by color, just because it's easy. We did t-shirts the first time. We're doing bandanas this year. I didn't include pictures of it. We had teams, like, all of them wore their team t-shirt, and they took a picture. They got a point for it. Stuff like that. And the biggest thing we want to harp on is that if you keep it informal, the more serious talks will follow. If they're okay with asking you, like, what'd you do last weekend? They're probably okay with saying, why'd you pick Clemson? Why'd you decide to go to grad school instead of industry? I really think that those more formal mentoring talks follow if the students are okay with meeting up and talking with other students. So let us know if you guys have any questions. That is the end. No, so we want to do new groups because working together, I actually purposely split up the group that won this past one because I want, as long as there are still undergrads and grad students interested in the same field, that matters more to us. And so, yeah, if, we don't have a lot of bioelectrical people, so they're probably always going to be together. But like the regenerative medicine group, we can mix and match, and I don't care so much if they win it. I'd rather that they have new, fresh people to talk to each time. Right, and following on top of that, like, we don't want people to be mentored by the same people all the time, right? So, and if you start as a sophomore, if you have, 8, 10 different graduate mentors, and that's what we want. We don't want just 1 or 2 people that you talk to. The bigger the net, the better, right? Sorry.
I think you mentioned that you had permanent mentors, right?
Yeah.
Can you go on a little bit more about what the role was? Like the mentor?
Yeah, so it kind of went down to the senior and the grad student, or myself in the mentoring chair for the undergrad segment of our student chapter. It was more that we were planning a lot of things, so we don't want to sway. We knew what the activities were, so we don't want to sway it. But we were still plenty capable of providing advice. So Allison was the undergrad mentor, or the undergrad mentorship chair, and she led the tours for all the freshmen. And so she kind of took on that lead role. Our postdoc she just couldn't commit to all of the event nights, but she still was like, any grad student that wants to talk to me, she would just stand up at the beginning of meetings and just say, this is what I do, if you are interested in learning about why I chose a postdoc. She also did a startup company at one point, so she was just like around for questions, I guess. It wasn't super formal.
One more question. In terms of mixing undergrad and graduate groups, did you have a graduate BMES group that helped with that, or how's that happen?
So our student chapter of BMES is divided up into undergraduate and graduate. So we have our graduate group, right? But we have a mentorship chair in both undergraduate and graduate. So Sarah worked with Allison to come together and put the word out to both graduate students and undergraduate students. And then at the initial event, that's where we started to break them up into teams based on interest. So it was.
What?
Secondary question from that.
Okay. So, like Sarah said, if you get them in the door with food first, it's great, and then you've got them hooked. But our graduate program, promoting the fact that they're working with undergrads and they're acting as mentors, I don't know how much convincing it took to get our graduate students to participate. Free food, again, helps, but I feel like we have a great group of graduate students, and they're always willing to help. So I think just asking, like, if you're interested and to show up. Beyond that, if you're trying to improve, you know, mentee, mentorship relations, trying to think of other things that you could potentially do.
You could woo them with the possibility of winning a Tamagotchi at the end.
Yeah.
So
a lot of 90s candy.
Yeah, honestly, it's just our grad group is pretty tight-knit and willing to do things. And like I said, it didn't take a lot of convincing, just keeping them there after we didn't, because honestly, I don't think if we had made the event at a random time and said, come to it, I don't know how many grad students would have come. But the fact that we already had them in one place and just asked them to stay, that seemed to help. And the undergrads come because they're seemingly getting more out of it because they're being mentored from the grad students. But that's why we also included nights like the Career Check night, because that was beneficial to them because they could talk to industry and academia options. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next set of speakers will be from the University of Pennsylvania for their Outstanding Outreach program.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here today. I'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Megan Ida, and I was the 2016-17 president for the graduate division of our student chapter. So I'm just going to give a quick intro and introduce Olivia, who's an undergraduate student, and Varsha, who's a graduate student. Olivia is a junior, and Varsha is a fourth-year PhD student, and they're going to talk a little bit more about our best practices and outreach, as they did a lot of this work this year. So just to give you an idea of our program, we have about 300 undergraduate students in Penn BE, 110 masters, and about 100 MD and PhD and MD PhD students. Just like Clemson, our program is divided kind of into an undergraduate and a graduate division. Each of our divisions do work separately, but we also collaborate on a lot of things. And one of the things we do collaborate a lot on is mentoring, just like Clemson talked about, and some of our outreach initiatives. So we do a lot of different types of events. One of them that you'll hear about more, again, is our mentoring, outreach, and service project, so I won't go too much into that. We do a lot with student well-being and social activities, and this is both in the undergraduate and graduate division. This year we've done a lot with graduate student well-being specifically, and I think that Varsha and Olivia will touch on that a little bit too. We do a whole bunch of outdoor recreation and sports events, so this includes intramural sports as well as skiing, camping, hiking, those types of things. We do a ton of professional and career development events. On the graduate side, this includes like a research symposium where we have graduate students present to the department. It brings the department together. As you guys know, in BE, it's very diverse, so it's a nice time to actually bring people together and hear about different fields in BE. I know the undergraduate group does a ton of good work with reaching out to industry and bringing undergraduate students in to connect them with industry, what they might want to do in the future. And we also have non-academic and academic-centered career events for graduate students too. One thing I want to emphasize, as I'm sure you guys know if you're part of your student chapters at your schools, is that our student groups, both divisions, really are the connection across students, faculty, and the department. And this is really good for community within our BE department. And I think that it's really important to the students and also communication across different tiers. So with that, I will introduce Olivia, who's going to start with the best practices, and then Varsha's kind of going to go into like a case study about one specific thing we've done with outreach this year.
Thanks. Okay, so things we've learned during our outreach experience that we hope you find helpful. So first, we really like working with established organizations, and the reason is they provide very reliable and easy-to-use platforms. So for example, if we wanted to mentor middle school students, we would have to contact middle schools, contact teachers, find students, figure out their schedules and transportation, and this is a lot of logistical work. But when we work with organizations like Spark and iPraxis, they do all of that for us, which is amazing, so that when it comes time to mentor, all we have to do is recruit grad students and show up. So that makes our lives much easier. Another example is we work with Relay for Life to contribute to the American Cancer Society. And so without Relay for Life, we would have to figure out a way to keep track of donations and sponsors. But Relay for Life already has that infrastructure, so that makes it easier for us to contribute. We also totally support including your whole BE department. So one of our events is Beta Day, and we work with iPraxis to invite middle school students to explore different aspects of engineering. And this event is really successful because we have grad students and undergrads, but our faculty and BE administration also talk to the students, and so that just provides a different perspective, which the students really appreciate. And our Penn labs also do demos and tours. So with working with the whole BE department, the students got a really comprehensive look, and that's something we couldn't have done without the whole department. Okay, this one we have been working on very intensely this year. So it's important to involve grad students and undergrads in planning. It forces us first to schedule really early. So in the first couple weeks, we already planned all of our semesters for the whole event, or all of the events for our whole semester. And we do this because, as Clemson said, grad students and undergrads have very different schedules. So by working together, we make sure our events are convenient for everyone. And we have also appointed a specific undergrad and grad student to be the liaison and communicate regularly, because it's easy to get off track between grads and undergrads. Our members also are interested in Nonstem Outreach, so we work with Love Your Park to maintain local parks, and Rebuilding Together Philadelphia to rebuild places in the city. And we have a small group of students who consistently go to this, but we aren't deterred by the low turnout because these students are really passionate and find this very rewarding. And lastly, we think it's very important to invest in your own community. So we do things like breakfast and lunches, and these are really easy, but it's important to check in on your students because in engineering, mental health can sometimes be overlooked. So it's important to keep your community close-knit and feeling supported. Okay, Varsha will take you through Spark.
Hi, so now I'm going to talk about what our partnership with Spark Mentoring has been like for the past year. I'd like to say that this is not advertising for Spark, but we've had a great relationship with them, and if you have the opportunity to work with Spark, we definitely recommend it to you. Spark is a mentoring program that gives middle school students the opportunity to explore different career paths that they might be interested in pursuing. These students typically don't have these types of opportunities. So Spark helps these students by planning workshops in the fall that basically serve as weekly field trips for the students. They go and explore different industries, and our graduate organization helps plan one of these. We start planning in early September, and the fall workshop actually happens in mid-October. And everything that I've marked with a star on this, I'm going to go into in some more detail. At the end of December, Spark contacts us to recruit mentors from bioengineering. We believe that since Spark brings the students to campus for us, and because mentors have had some exposure to what Spark is via the workshop, they're a lot more willing to be mentors. This is the 10-week mentoring program that you participate in. Middle school students are partnered with graduate students based on their interests, both academic and in terms of what they want to do in their careers. It starts in February at match night, and it goes on for 10 weeks where you and your mentor work on a project together, and the student finally gets to present that to all their peers at Discovery Night. So now I'm going to start by talking about the Spark workshop. The workshop has about 20 students come to Penn's campus and rotate through 3 different lab groups, and we got to design one of the labs. So In this process, we started by brainstorming some ideas. 20 minutes is a very short amount of time, so we needed the activity to be very simple. This would also be happening in a conference room, so we couldn't do anything really messy. So of course, when we started, a lot of our ideas were absolutely terrible, but we finally settled on basing something off of this making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich activity. If you're unfamiliar with the activity, students are basically asked to give instructors very detailed instructions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And if the instructions are too vague, the instructor basically flails about and is like, I don't know what to do. So the idea behind this is that students have to give very detailed instructions because when you're coding, you have to give a computer very detailed instructions to make everything function the way you want it to function. So we decided to design something very similar using Legos, because Legos are cheap and they're fun. So we pre-built a bunch of structures, and each student got a structure. So student A would look at this structure and would go ahead and write some instructions on how they would build this structure. Each student had a graduate student sitting with them and giving them advice on how to go about the process of writing these instructions. As you can see here, all the students decided to write instructions in a giant paragraph, which confused me. I would write instructions as bullet points, but it's just some of the things that you don't consider when you first plan an activity. So these instructions then went to student B. Student A actually got student B's instructions, so they ended up swapping information. And then student B also got a bag full of all the Legos they would need to build the part. And then they just followed the instructions, and they were confused a lot of the times, and they finally built the part. And you can see here that the part you end up with was not the part you started with. And like I said, because students A and B actually swapped instructions, they ended up arguing a lot about how each other's instructions were terrible and how they weren't detailed enough. But it was a great learning experience for the students, and they all had a lot of fun. So some things we learned while planning this activity. Number one, stand on the shoulders of giants. You don't need to come up with an activity on your own. You can take something that's tried and true and kind of mold it to what you need. Number two, simplicity is key. Simplicity just makes everything easier, and you can still get your point across even with a very simple concept. Which brings me to number three, something you think is simple may actually be very complicated. When we first built these Lego structures, we built them out of 10 to 15 Legos, and we were like, oh, that shouldn't be too bad. And then we realized halfway through that we had to break them all back down to 5 Legos each. Just something to keep in mind. So now I'm going to move on to the spring portion of this whole mentoring program. So in the spring, like I said, there are one-on-one mentoring matches made, and I'm going to give you some statistics first. So this is the number of BE students who have participated in mentoring over the last 5 years. As you can see, in 2016, we started getting a lot more mentors, and that's because that's when we started working directly with Spark to recruit mentors. In 2017, we had 11 BE mentors mentoring 10 middle school students. A lot of these mentors were first-year students, and actually a lot of the older mentors were actually co-mentors. They found that this reduced the stress, so if 1 week one of the mentors had a pressing deadline, the other mentor could take over. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience mentoring this middle school student. Her name is Samaya. She was a 7th grader at the Henry C. Lee Middle School. When we first met, she started talking about how she wanted to be an amazing businesswoman who worked on the top floor of a big building that was in Dubai. She really liked Dubai. She was very excited and lots of fun to work with. So after she told me that she wanted to be like a corporate businesswoman, I was like, oh my God, why am I her mentor? And then she started telling me about her academic interests, and she was like, I'm very interested in math and science, and she really liked the simplicity of math. And I was like, okay, I understand now. So we ended up designing a project where we would use SolidWorks to design buildings that we found online that she liked the look of. And these are 2 buildings that we designed in SolidWorks, and I'll show them to you on the next slide. In addition, socially at the beginning, Samaya was actually very shy. She was actually very open with me, but anytime she had to talk to like one of my coworkers or even some of the Spark organizers, she was very shy and very uncertain of herself. But by the end, when we finally ended up 3D printing these things that we built in SolidWorks, we were talking to the tech who printed it for us, and she had plenty of questions. And I feel like I really tried to encourage her comfort in my lab by just having her talk to someone every time she came to our office. And I feel like that really paid off. So this is Samaya at Discovery Night. We didn't end up with a big office building. She ended up designing something called Samaya's Garden, which was an island where families could go to relax. And each of these ancillary buildings here had a specification where you could do different types of relaxing. Like one of them's a spa, and one of them's like for people to play all the sports that they like. You can see in the center that you can see the buildings that I showed you on the previous slide, and then all the surrounding buildings were Samaya actually designed from her imagination, which is one of the things that she thought she learned throughout this process. She said that at the end, she really wished that she'd designed more buildings based on what she imagined in her mind as opposed to what she saw on the internet. At the end of this, Samaya also was very interested in engineering. She got obviously a lot of exposure through working with me about what being an engineer means, and we got to talk a lot about that, and I was very happy that she was at least considering it. So this was a very rewarding experience for me, and I really enjoyed it. And then here are a couple other projects from Discovery Night. Like I said, we had 11 graduate student mentors. So this is an earthquake-resistant building design. This is a quadcopter. This student was actually co-mentored by 2 older students. On the right here, we have a water irrigation system, a retractable keychain, and there were 2 students who studied neuron growth in vitro, and these 2 students were also co-mentored by 2 older students. So a few weeks after Discovery Night, we all got thank you letters from our mentees expressing how much they enjoyed working with us and that they felt like they had a great time and that they got a lot out of the experience. I think these thank you letters really exemplify how amazingly organized Spark is. They never really have issues getting students to you on time. If your student is sick or not coming one day, they contact you in advance. And like Olivia mentioned, working with someone like Spark who's so organized makes it really easy for graduate students to be amazing mentors. So afterwards, we asked our Spark mentors some questions. We asked them if they found the mentoring experience rewarding, and 100% of them said yes, which I think is amazing, but also is reflective of the fact that you get a one-on-one, long-term relationship with these students. And then when we asked them if they would be willing to be mentors again next year, at least half of them said that they would be, and some others were considering it. So I feel like this is quite favorable outcomes from working with Spark. So to summarize, why do we like working with Spark? Number 1, they're very organized. Like I said, they're always on time. They know what they're doing. You don't have any real kinks to work out, which also goes with number 2. Their program is fully developed, so they're not changing things last minute or anything like that. Number 3, the students come to you, so as a mentor, you're not taking time off work to go do something other than your job. Your student comes to you, and you sit in a room. And in a lot of corporate offices, there's a group of mentors, and it's just what they do on Tuesday afternoons, and it's not considered like not doing their job. Number 4, as I said, and I think this is the most important one, you develop a meaningful one-on-one relationship with the student that you're mentoring. I think it's great to do one-day mentoring outreach events to students, and I think it really excites them, but I think when you develop that meaningful relationship with the student, it inspires them, and you find it very rewarding as well. Now, Megan is going to wrap up.
Thanks, and I just want to say I also participated as a Spark Mentor the last 2 years, and even though we do tons of outreach, STEM, and other, that's just one example of something that's been really successful and we found awesome. I think that those longitudinal outreach events, it's not just a one-time thing, become quite meaningful because you really develop that relationship that Varsha was talking about. Okay, I want to thank some people. I want to thank Sonia, who is the another outreach graduate chair who couldn't be here today. Patrick was the other president for the graduate group, and Shira was the undergraduate president for our student chapter. I want to thank Dr. Meany, who's our department chair, and Dr. Winkelstein, who's our faculty advisor. All of the BE staff help put on all of our events, and so a big thank you to them. Jordan is the liaison that we work with Spark, so he really got that partnership going. We work with him a lot. And all of our GABE and BMES members, so just being in the program makes you available to, as a student, participate in either GABE, the graduate, or BMES, the undergraduate divisions of our student chapter. But we also have boards on both ends that work to make all these events possible. And also, lastly, to all our corporate members that you guys mentioned throughout. And thank you to BMES for letting us be here, and for the award, we're happy to be here and share with you some of the work we've done this last year. So we'd be happy to take any questions. Thanks. Yeah.
Sorry, can you say that louder? Students would come weekly, and they'd work with you Tuesdays from 3 to 5 for 2 hours. And the whole program is 10 weeks long, but there would be gaps for like spring break or like a snow day or something like that.
How does Spark choose who the mentors are? Do you just take everybody who applies?
Spark does take everyone who applies, but they ask you very detailed questions about what your interests are, what your background is. And so when they match the students, they actually sit down and do individual interviews with the students to see what they would be interested in going into and to see what their academic interests are, because those two don't often align because students don't really understand, you know, like what you need to know or be good at to get a certain job. So they do a very detailed interviewing process and matching process. They do background checks as well. I think that's just like detail. But for the most part, if people volunteer to be Spark mentors, they take them on.
There are other departments in Penn that also participate, like so in the design school and the dental school. And so if like the kids who participate in Spark say like I want to be a dentist or I want to do architecture, then they would filter them towards other departments where they filter other like engineering interests towards us.
Right.
So.
So is Spark a national thing entity, or is it Clemson, South Carolina, or is it more focused on the university?
Spark is national, but they only exist in certain cities, and they tend to be major cities. So they have a map if you go on their website. And if they exist in your city, then I highly recommend partnering with them. Because like I said, they're super organized, and they make it so easy to have such a meaningful like outreach experience.
The other group we mentioned, iPraxis, is local. It's similar to Spark. They kind of target the same group of middle school kids that are local. They're a little bit, any events we do with them are normally like one-time things, and they're valuable and very good, but I think Spark is useful in that, as everything Varsha said, they're very developed and you can get that longitudinal experience.
Yeah, and I would say that like with iPraxis, the flip side of the situation is that because they're not very developed, we can help develop a program. So one of the events that Olivia mentioned was Beta Day, which we developed many years ago in partnership with iPraxis, and we could include a lot of our vision in that planning, whereas we wouldn't be able to do that with Spark.
There's a lot of hurdles with working with like underage kids, like locally, like STEM outreach, and I think that those organizations really help mitigate a lot of those things, like having background checks and like making sure transporting the students from the school somewhere else. There's huge, that's a lot more difficult logistically than we would be able to probably do. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our last group is from the University of Maryland, and they have one for the Outstanding Industry Chapter Industry Award.
Good morning. We're here to present on professional development opportunities within the BMES student chapters. We are from the University of Maryland Fischel Department of Bioengineering. I'm Shannon Larson, our chapter president and a senior at UMD.
And my name is Lenny Nakas. I'm a senior bioengineering student at the University of Maryland, and I'm the vice president of professional affairs at our chapter.
So I just wanted to start with some background on our University of Maryland BMES chapter. We are primarily focused on professional development, though we do a lot of activities outside of this, including outreach programs, mentoring programs, social activities, and other events. We have 309 student members signed up on our email listserv, and about 15% of those achieved active status last year of getting 8 points or more, which we usually do around 1 point per event. And one thing to note is that we are right near Washington, D.C., which is really great for our chapter because we're so close to all the federal agencies like FDA and NIH and NIST, and so it's really helpful for when we're planning our professional events to network with those communities as well. So I wanted to start off with some of our industry goals and more about our industry program in general, and then Eleni will walk you through some of our specific events. Our goals, we broke into the different stakeholders. For the students, we want to introduce students to various career paths. There's so many options you can do with bioengineering, and so we want students, especially the younger students, to be able to know what those options are and more about them so that they can pick their track focus and pick which industry field they might want to do their internships in. We also want to not only show students what the cool different tracks of bioengineering are, but also how to become successful in them and achieve those career goals. How do they get from their freshman year to obtaining a job in that industry or working in a graduate school research lab in that industry? And we also want to provide those networking and job opportunities for them to get that experience. For the industry partners, we also have various goals. We have to have the industry partners come into University of Maryland or devote their time otherwise to us, so they're already very busy with their work and their family life, and so we have to have some benefits for them. The first is that it allows employers to announce job opportunities and meet potential candidates. When we have industry speakers come in, often at the end of the talks, they're like, come up to me if you're interested in working in the company, and we can have chat and follow this up with a further email or LinkedIn conversation. And then we can also provide those industry partners opportunities to give back to the bioengineering community and help shape the future of where bioengineering is going by talking to the younger students that are going to be the next generation of bioengineers. And then also a lot of our industry speakers who come in are actually pretty young industry professionals, and so having that opportunity is, they can remember pretty clearly when they were undergraduates, and so it's kind of nice when you had that experience of having someone when you were an undergraduate, so you want to provide that now for the next undergraduate students. And then just for our organization itself, we want to expose local companies to UMD bioengineering and increase our reputation in the area in order to encourage more University of Maryland hiring so that local companies know that we produce strong bioengineers who would make great candidates in their positions. So I think it's important before we talk about our specific events to understand where our students go after graduation, because we want to tailor events to those different places and make sure we include a wide range of events. So a little over 50% of our students after graduation go into industry, and you have the typical bioengineering industries you think of: biopharmaceuticals, biotechnology, medical devices and technology, and things like that. But then we also have ones you might not think of right away as a freshman coming into bioengineering. You can go into government and regulatory, especially because, as I mentioned, we're right next to the FDA and NIH and NIST. You could go into systems engineering or consulting, because a lot of companies outside of bioengineering love our bioengineers still because we have those problem-solving skills and that data analysis experience. And then a lot of our students also go on to further schooling, whether or not it's research programs, PhD, or master's programs, or into the medical field for medical school. And this is a brief overview of the different type of events we do, and Eleni will go into more detail about what each of these events are. But guest speakers are probably our most common type of event, where we have one person from industry come into our University of Maryland campus and give a talk to students. And those talks can either be focused like very detailed on the research, or like a broad overview of their company and the different areas and products that their company does, or more of a how-to get from undergraduate to industry. We do career fair prep workshops, and they're like the days right before the career fair. We also do actual career fairs and company booths, and typically the department is the one who organizes these, or we have a specific engineering, career, and co-op services department, and so they'll actually do the work of getting all the companies to come, but we heavily advertise the event. And then finally, we do lab tours, alumni and graduate school panels, and then competition sponsorship. So I'm going to pass it over to Eleni now to give more detail about all these events.
So going over just the people that we contact in order to set up these events, first off, we have bioengineering alumni, like we mentioned earlier. At our career fair prep workshop, we actually have someone from BD who was a UMD BioE, and it's a really nice opportunity because she is the recruiter that students see the next day at the career fair. So drawing from that alumni network is very useful. We also use former managers and work contacts. So for example, I worked at Deloitte this summer, and I'm setting up a case workshop with them for this semester to get students exposed to consulting. Also local companies, so we have running relationships with local companies in the biotech area within Maryland, such as MedImmune, such as MSD. Professors' contacts, obviously. Professors have people that they did grad school with at other schools and also locally that they can draw from to really expand the variety of topics that we have speakers talk about. Additionally, we have our University of Maryland Department board, the advisory board, and the corporate relations director that help in facilitating other events. So these are the events that we did this past year. And as you can see, since we are in DC, we are very close to the NIH, to the FDA. So it's very easy for us to draw on those relationships and have these events for our students. In addition, the cool opportunity that we have is we have connections with co-founders and founders of certain startups, local startups. And it's really nice because, for example, after the MSD event this past fall, the CEO was very casual and told everyone, feel free to come up to me afterwards and talk to me about your career interests, and I can see if I can get you a position at our company. So it's really nice to have that lecture at the beginning, but have that time afterwards. It's a very casual conversation to really connect with that CEO and have that connection that you can use in the future. So this is the career fair prep workshop that I was talking about before that is run by a UMD alum. And it's a really nice opportunity to get your resume reviewed, make sure that it is up to par when you go to the career fair the next day. And then if you're interested in BD, you can go to their table and you already know the recruiter. So having that connection beforehand is a huge confidence boost for students, so they feel comfortable going up to the booth the next day. As we mentioned before, the career fairs and the networking events are mostly organized by our undergraduate bioengineering department and the undergraduate School of Engineering. But as a student society, we do promote that, and we make sure students are aware and they're prepared when they go to the career fairs. And additionally, we promote our AstraZeneca and MedImmune booth, which is actually coming up in a week or two. So it's a nice opportunity for students to get in contact with that recruiter so that their resumes can then be pulled out when they're doing that filtering process for the internships and full-time positions. So these are the lab tours that we did this past year. The Institute for In Vitro Sciences is a local startup near Maryland, and the cool opportunity with this is we had lectures and talks throughout the day, but we also got to get into the lab, and we did a hand-on experiment with cow eyes, so that was a cool experience for students to see what you would actually do at that institute. Additionally, we went to the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, and it's interesting because before going, a lot of the students had no idea that they do research on campus at the Smithsonian. So we actually got to see the genetic research and the bioinformatics research that they do, and the genetic sequencing devices that they use. So that was a very cool opportunity. Moving forward, we also do speaker panels. So not only alumni and industry to get students exposed to the different companies that are local to Maryland, but also if people are interested in graduate school. We want to make sure that we're offering opportunities for students pursuing a variety of career paths after graduating. And additionally, the undergraduate engineering school at Maryland does an annual Rube Goldberg competition. So we were actually very successful this past year and won first place. And in addition to that, we got sponsored by Beckman Coulter. So we plan to foster that relationship in the future. So these are the events that I've been planning for this year. So we actually went to the FDA about 2 weeks ago. And this connection I actually had through one of our undergraduate courses. We had guest speakers in the class. And I thought that her research in neural engineering was super interesting, so I kept in contact with her over the course of the past 2 years. And I think the students really liked that opportunity. We got to play with robotic arms and that kind of stuff, so it was a cool opportunity. Additionally, as I mentioned, I interned for Deloitte this summer, and I really want to expose bioengineering students to the possibilities that consulting offers, and especially by focusing a case that is more healthcare centered, since we are drawn to those topics as bioengineers. And then the rest of the events we have planned for the spring. The first one is the Leidos Biomedical Lab Tour, and we actually got that through our corporate relations director at the undergraduate engineering school. Additionally, we have an FDA speaker who is actually the CBIRD branch chief, and Shannon and I were lucky enough a couple weeks ago to have lunch with him. And after networking with him and talking about his research, he said, feel free to, take my card and I'll come talk to your students in the spring. So it's really nice to have those opportunities facilitated to us through the undergraduate engineering department for these guest speaker opportunities. And then last but not least, Shannon interned at MedImmune this summer. So Dr. Berg, who is her boss, is going to come and speak to us in the spring. So here's just some tips that we have for student chapters. We recognize that we are in no ways a perfect chapter, and we're still working on a lot of these things as well. So we figure it's just a good thing to get that out there to everyone. So first off, like we mentioned, we want events that fit a variety of career paths. Like we mentioned, a lot of people go to medical school, to graduate school, but other people go to industry. Other people do systems engineering and consulting. That's kind of pretty different, but still you use those problem-solving skills that you learn in undergrad. Also, staying in contact with speakers periodically. So this might be just a general networking thing, but after you get that business card and follow up that instant, maintain that relationship throughout the next couple of years or two, because you never know if you're going to want to draw back on that relationship in the future. Additionally, doing interest surveys before and after to really make sure that your events are interesting for students and they find them valuable. And yeah. And then also keeping a list of contacts for future boards. So we're going to start this year, but what we found out last year is we didn't have a formal list. So we had to talk to the past year's board and be like, hey, do you remember that speaker from so-and-so company? But keeping a Google Drive and a list of that will just streamline the planning going forward. Also, we want to create a more formal way of keeping in contact with alumni. So whether that's through a LinkedIn network, we just want to have all of those connections in one place so we can easily draw on those in the future. And also, increasing our involvement with other student groups, especially in the engineering school. So we plan to do more events that partner with AEMB and Engineering World Health, in addition to other undergraduate groups in the engineering school as well, to broaden our impact on the engineering school.
So that concludes our presentation. Thank you for listening, and I also want to thank the rest of our executive board. 2 of our members are here, Jessica and Connie, and then some of our board is attending the conference, and then also our faculty mentor, Dr. J, is in the audience. And I'd like to open the floor to any questions. Yes.
You mentioned that you heavily advertise for the career fair. What ways are you reaching the student body?
The question was, what ways are we reaching our student body? One is primarily we have an OrgSync account, which is just, it's like a social media page specifically for student clubs that all of the University of Maryland uses. And that is where we do our email listserv from. And so we do a lot of emails. Like we send out a weekly email with all of our upcoming events. And then for major events, we'll send a reminder like the night before. We have a Facebook page. where we put updates on. We have a website where we put different, like a calendar and different event blurbs. Sometimes we can email the entire bioengineering undergraduate listserv if it's a really major event, or we can post flyers around the bioengineering walls, or just word of mouth. Those are the main ways we use. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
If not, thank you very much. I'd like to give one more round of applause to all those people who showed up today and who presented.